Back in Star Wars, filmmakers didn't have powerful computers, advanced software, or digital effects. And yet, they built an entire galaxy that felt real, from massive space battles to holographic games and glowing lightsabers. So, how did they do it? In today's video, we're going behind the scenes to uncover the genius practical effects, clever tricks, and filmmaking secrets that made Star Wars a timeless masterpiece. Trust me, what you're about to see will completely change the way you look at this film. One of the most surprising moments for audiences back in Star Wars was the introduction of Luke Skywalker riding his iconic X-34 landspeeder, a vehicle that appears to float effortlessly above the ground. For modern viewers, it might seem like a simple CGI effect, but in 1977, this illusion was created entirely through practical ingenuity. In reality, the landspeeder wasn't flying at all. It was a three-wheeled custom-built vehicle, constructed using the chassis of a British car known as the Bond Bug. It even had a functioning engine, allowing it to drive normally across the desert terrain. The real challenge, however, was hiding the wheels to create that hovering effect. To achieve this, the filmmakers used a clever trick. Mirrors were installed underneath the vehicle, angled in such a way that they reflected the ground below. As the speeder moved across the desert, the mirrors blended seamlessly with the sand, making the wheels appear invisible and giving the illusion that the vehicle was floating. But that's not all. If you look at behind-the-scenes footage, you'll notice a large metal structure attached to the vehicle, something that might initially look like it's lifting or controlling the speeder. In reality, this was a camera rig, not a support system for flight. Director George Lucas wanted the camera to stay extremely low to the ground and very close to the speeder, capturing smooth, cinematic motion without showing any crew or equipment in the frame. This extended arm allowed the camera to follow the vehicle from dynamic angles that would otherwise be impossible. As the story continues in Star Wars, Luke ventures deeper into the harsh desert of the Jundland Wastes in search of R2-D2. The scene quickly shifts in tone when he is ambushed by the mysterious Tusken Raiders, also known as the Sand People. The setting feels empty, dangerous, and unpredictable, and much of that realism comes from practical effects and grounded design choices. One of the most fascinating elements in this sequence is the Bantha, a large, furry creature that looks completely alien. Surprisingly, this wasn't an animation or a puppet. It was actually a real elephant wearing a detailed costume. The production team covered the animal with yak hair and natural fibers to create thick fur, while the head and horns were shaped using lightweight materials like foam and wire. The biggest challenge was ensuring the elephant could move comfortably while wearing the costume, which required careful coordination during filming. In Star Wars, there's a small moment that most people overlook. As Luke, Obi-Wan, and Chewbacca travel aboard the Millennium Falcon, the camera briefly shifts to a corner of the ship, where C-3PO and Chewbacca are sitting beside a table. And on that table, we see what looks like a futuristic holographic game. Tiny alien creatures appear to rise from the surface, battling each other in a glowing, three-dimensional projection. For a 1977 audience, this felt unbelievably advanced, almost like real digital hologram technology. But the reality is that nothing was actually there. During filming, the table was completely empty. There were no projections, no creatures, no visual guides. The actors had to rely purely on imagination, reacting to something that didn't exist. And after that, legendary visual effects artist Phil Tippett designed each of those creatures from scratch. Instead of using computers, which didn't exist for this kind of work back then, he used stop-motion animation. Each creature was a physical model. Tippett would move them slightly, capture a frame, move them again, and repeat this process hundreds of times. When all the frames were played together, it created smooth, lifelike motion. But even that wasn't enough. To place these animated creatures into the scene, the team used optical compositing, carefully layering the animation onto the original footage. Every frame had to be aligned perfectly, so the creatures looked like they were actually sitting on that table. And the final result was an illusion that was so convincing, and it made audiences believe they were looking at the future. What looked like cutting-edge hologram technology was actually a painstakingly crafted practical effect built frame by frame. Now, let's talk about one of the most iconic characters in the film, Chewbacca. On screen, he appears as a towering, powerful alien creature covered in thick fur. But behind the camera, he was brought to life by an actor, Peter Mayhew. Mayhew was naturally very tall, nearly 7.3 feet, which made him perfect for the role. But transforming him into Chewbacca required something far more complex than just height. The costume itself was a full bodysuit made from real yak hair, designed to look as natural and organic as possible. Every strand, every layer was carefully crafted. This wasn't just a costume, it was a detailed piece of creature design. But wearing it came with serious challenges. Inside the suit, temperatures would rise quickly, making it extremely uncomfortable during long shoots. On top of that, visibility was limited, meaning Mayhew couldn't fully see what was happening around him. Because of this, his movements had to be slow, deliberate, and controlled. Interestingly, this limitation became a strength. Those heavy, measured movements gave Chewbacca a sense of weight, presence, and power that made the character feel even more real. And the voice of Chewbacca wasn't Mayhew either. Sound designers create Chewbacca's voice by blending recordings of different animals, carefully mixing them to produce that iconic sound. So what you hear and see on screen isn't just acting, it's a seamless combination of performance, costume engineering, and sound design working together. Midway through the film, tension rises as Obi-Wan Kenobi sneaks deep inside the Death Star to disable the tractor beam. In this scene, he steps onto a narrow platform, and beside him is a massive vertical shaft that appears to stretch endlessly into darkness. It feels terrifying, like he's standing at the edge of a bottomless pit inside a gigantic industrial structure, but in reality, that massive depth was an illusion. The actual set built for this scene was relatively small, just enough for the actor to safely stand and perform. But the endless drop you see on screen was created using a classic filmmaking technique known as matte painting. Artists painted the lower portion of the environment by hand, carefully designing it to match the real set above. Then, this painted image was combined with the live-action footage to extend the environment far beyond what physically existed. To make the illusion believable, the team matched lighting, shadows, and perspective perfectly, so the painted section blended seamlessly with the real set. Even the platform itself was designed to look thinner and more dangerous than it actually was. So what appears to be a massive, deadly industrial space was actually a small set enhanced by art, lighting, and camera tricks. One of the most iconic moments of this movie is the lightsaber duel between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader. On screen, the fight feels intense and emotional, but compared to modern Star Wars battles, it appears surprisingly slow and controlled. During filming, the lightsabers were practical props built from modified camera flash handles, known as Graflex units. Inside each saber, a small light mechanism was installed for the glowing effect, but there was a problem. These props were extremely fragile. If the actor struck too hard, the blades could easily break, so every movement had to be carefully planned and executed. Because of this, the duel was choreographed in a slow, deliberate style, heavily inspired by traditional samurai sword fighting. Each strike was controlled, each movement was precise, and in many cases, the actors would stop just short of actual contact to avoid damaging the props. The camera work also played a role. Mostly stable shots were used so the audience could clearly follow the action while maintaining visual continuity. What might seem like a limitation actually gave the fight a unique, tense, and disciplined energy. At the end of the duel, there's a moment that feels almost supernatural. As Darth Vader delivers his final strike, Obi-Wan suddenly vanishes, leaving behind nothing but his empty robe. It's mysterious, spiritual, almost as if he has transcended into another form. But behind the scenes, the effect was surprisingly simple and incredibly clever. The filmmakers used a two-shot editing technique. In the first shot, actor Alec Guinness stands in position as Vader swings his lightsaber. Then, a second shot was filmed with the exact same camera angle and lighting, but this time, Guinness was removed from the frame and only the robe was placed on the ground. During editing, those two shots were cut together with perfect timing. The instant Vader's strike lands, the film cuts to the second shot and creates the illusion that Obi-Wan disappeared in a single moment. No CGI, no digital effects, just precise timing, clever editing, and pure filmmaking creativity. In Star Wars, whenever the Millennium Falcon glides through space, surrounded by stars, it feels incredibly smooth and realistic, almost like something created with modern CGI. But the truth is, back in 1977, there were no advanced visual effects software or digital tools to rely on, and yet, what audiences saw on screen was years ahead of its time. The Millennium Falcon you see isn't a real spacecraft, it's actually a highly detailed miniature model, roughly 5 feet long. But this wasn't just any model. The artists at Industrial Light and Magic covered its surface with thousands of tiny mechanical parts, giving it a complex, worn-out, and realistic texture. Even in close-up shots, it convincingly felt like a full-scale spaceship. To film it, the model was mounted on a support rig, usually a metal rod painted blue, which held it steady in mid-air. The entire setup was placed inside a blue screen environment, often referred to as the Big Blue Box. The reason for using blue was simple. Both the background and the support rig could later be removed during compositing, allowing space visuals to replace them seamlessly. But the real breakthrough came with how movement was created. In the final film, it looks like the Falcon is flying through space, but in reality, the ship never moved at all. Instead, the model was kept completely still, and the camera moved around it, using a revolutionary system known as motion control photography. This system allowed the filmmakers to repeat the exact same camera movement multiple times with perfect precision. Because it allowed them to shoot different elements separately, the ship's body, its glowing lights, engine effects, and then combine all of them later using optical compositing. The final result was a seamless illusion, a spaceship that feels like it's truly flying through space, when, in reality, it was just a small, stationary model captured through layered filmmaking techniques. And to complete the illusion, full-scale interior sets of the Millennium Falcon were also built. So whenever you see characters inside the cockpit, that's a real set. But when the ship flies through space, you're watching a miniature. As the film builds toward its climax, the scale suddenly explodes into an intense space battle. Luke Skywalker leads a squad of X-Wing fighters in a desperate attack on the Death Star, while enemy TIE fighters chase them through space, firing lasers in a fast-paced aerial dogfight. At first glance, this looks like a massive digital battle, but in reality, it was crafted entirely using miniature models and practical effects. Every ship you see, whether it's an X-Wing or a TIE fighter, was a small physical model meticulously built by artists at Industrial Light and Magic. Each one was mounted in front of a blue screen using thin support rods, allowing them to be positioned precisely for filming. And just like the Millennium Falcon, these ships didn't actually move either. Instead, the camera moved around them using motion control systems, creating the illusion of high-speed flight. This technique also allowed filmmakers to shoot multiple passes, capturing different lighting, angles, and details, which were later combined into a single dynamic shot. But what truly brought the battle to life were the explosions. Whenever a ship is hit and explodes, it feels incredibly real, like a massive object being destroyed in space. But behind the scenes, these explosions were carefully engineered using miniature destruction techniques. Each model was modified specifically for these shots. Small pyrotechnic charges and squibs were placed inside the miniature ships. When triggered remotely, these charges would cause the model to explode in a controlled way. However, simply blowing up a small model wouldn't look convincing at normal speed. So, filmmakers used high-speed photography, capturing the explosion at a much higher frame rate. When played back at normal speed, the explosion appears slower, heavier, and far more powerful, giving the illusion of a large-scale blast. This trick made even tiny models feel like massive spacecraft being destroyed. The most iconic part of the climax is the Death Star trench run, where Luke flies his X-Wing into a narrow trench, racing toward the exhaust port to deliver the final blow. On screen, this sequence feels massive, like a high-speed flight across the surface of a gigantic space station. But in reality, the entire environment was a giant miniature model. To create this, the team built a long, highly detailed trench set, divided into multiple sections, and then assembled together. The surface was covered with thousands of tiny elements, panels, pipes, mechanical structures, all designed to enhance the sense of scale and depth. When filming, the camera was moved very close to the surface of the model, often at low angles. This created the illusion that a fast-moving spacecraft was racing through a massive structure. Explosions within the trench were also done practically, using controlled miniature blasts, just like the space battle. Multiple layers of explosions were later combined to create a large cinematic impact. Finally, the shots of X-Wings and TIE fighters were composited on top of this trench footage. So what you see in the final film isn't a single shot, it's a combination of multiple layers, models, explosions, and camera passes, all perfectly blended together. And that's what makes this sequence so special. Even today, decades later, it still feels real, immersive, and incredibly thrilling, proving that creativity and craftsmanship can outperform even the most advanced technology. Bringing the iconic droid duo C-3PO and R2-D2 to life in Star Wars was nothing short of a filmmaking miracle. The golden design of C-3PO was inspired by the classic film Metropolis, 1927, visualized by legendary artist Ralph McQuarrie. But while the character looked elegant on screen, the reality for actor Anthony Daniels was extremely challenging. The suit was rigid, tight, and uncomfortable. So much so that on the very first day of shooting, a broken piece injured his foot. He couldn't sit down or even see properly inside the costume, and during breaks, he had to rest while standing, supported by a wooden board. R2-D2, on the other hand, might look like a fully automated robot, but the truth was far more complicated. Early remote-controlled versions kept malfunctioning, especially in the desert environments. So, for most scenes, a 3-foot 8-inch actor, Kenny Baker, was placed inside the droid to physically operate it. Interestingly, R2-D2's machine-like design, filled with wires, panels, and mechanical details, was intentional. George Lucas wanted him to feel like a real working piece of equipment, rather than a human-like character. While Baker controlled movement from inside, features like the rotating dome, blinking lights, and tools were operated externally, using remote systems. So the charming chemistry you see between these two droids was actually the result of physical discomfort, clever engineering, and creative problem-solving ideas. In the end, it wouldn't be wrong to say that Star Wars proved something truly powerful. With creativity, practical effects, and smart camera techniques, filmmakers were able to create a space experience that felt incredibly real, even without CGI. Even today, it still looks just as immersive, believable, and impressive as it did back in 1977. If you're enjoying these behind-the-scenes secrets and want more deep dives into legendary movies like this, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel.